Okay, we will call the meeting to order at 7:34 Mountain, and everyone on the committee is here with the exception of Matthias, who was feeling sick. So Matthias Goodley is absent. I'm just saying this really for the record and the recording and for me to take notes of. And I think, Wayne, are you joining us?
Well, I got to figure out how to get on because I just lost my Google account again.
Okay, well, maybe Wayne will be joining us. I can't do tech support while I'm chairing a meeting. If he comes and he has public comment, we can interrupt proceedings for that. If in the Google Drive, I want to alert you guys to something. There's a folder called Minutes. Committees aren't really required to keep minutes, but we do have to keep track of our work. So what I've decided to do, since we don't have a committee secretary, though volunteers are always welcome, I started a document called Running Committee Notes, and I'm just going to keep very loose, not lose track of what we're passing, but lose track of everything else. I'm going to keep attendance and what we've passed. So it's not going to be as complex as meetings normally get. And I'm just going to keep it all in one document. Like I'll start a heading for today underneath that one. So it'll all just be in that one document so we can keep track of what we're passing. And the only thing we had on the agenda tonight, I believe, is the convention standing rules and associated bylaws changes. And I do see Wayne is here, but I want to double check that. You're going to need to put yourself on mute.
Yep.
Let me just double, unless you want to say anything in public comment. Because if you do, now's your opportunity. No?
I have nothing to say at this point.
Okay. All right. Yes. So all that is on the agenda for this evening is consideration and adoption of proposal. I put for additional of convention standing rules. I meant for addition. And we did have a proposal to do as the launching point, which is what we talked about last week, which was Mr. Seebeck's proposal. I'm going to share my screen. First, let me pull it up on my computer, and then I'll share my screen once I have it up. Just got to find where I downloaded it. And I also distributed amendments I intend to move, and that will obviously be a committee decision. So I hope everyone had a chance to review them, and we'll be able to give arguments and stuff for them this evening. But I want to pull both of these up. Mike and I did discuss some of these changes ahead of time. Some we agree upon, some we don't, and that's just kind of the way it goes. All right, so let me pull up. I have them both, but I want to put up on the screen Mike's. And I am going to share my screen. Once I can find that button. Okay, do you guys see my screen?
Yes, yes, I see the proposal.
Okay, perfect. And I'm gonna scroll down. Mike, I assume you want to, how do you want to handle, it's your proposal. So unless you don't have a preferred way to handle, I would like you to have it handled in the way you prefer if you have a preference.
One second. For some reason, my settings just went wacky and I'm having trouble seeing it. So it's not your side, it's my side. So bear with me one moment.
Of course, it's not me, it's you. It's...
Well, you know, you can't be wrong all the time.
Oh my God, here we go. We're gonna have an episode of Cult of R.O.N.R.
I'm actually wearing my Call the Question Bitches shirt.
Call the question, bitches.
Okay, I think I've got, yeah, okay, now I can see it. Okay. Okay. there's two parts to this whole thing. The first part is what you see in front of you, which is the proposal to amend the bylaws to link the convention rules into the bylaws to say that the convention will follow them. It also adds a second part in there to say that a special convention shall also use the rules. The difference is that because of the limited nature of a special convention, the special convention does not give the delegates the ability to amend, add, or delete them at a special convention, but that can be addressed at a normal convention. And because they are rules, they will take a 2/3 vote. The second part of it is the actual attached rules themselves.
So what I would suggest, and ask you if you agree, is we deal with the bylaws amendments first. And
Sure.
then consider the standing rules seriation.
I think that's the best way to approach it because there's actually two parts to the standing rules. One is what's going to be linked in here for 2024 and beyond, and then the other set is for 2023. The reason that they're separate is because we don't want to have a bylaws change, which normally takes effect immediately, turn around and possibly change the rules in mid-convention. That's just going to cause confusion.
Yeah, I figured we would deal first with the proposal that's going to be the permanent standing rules, because I think that will help guide us in the ones that'll be just for this
Also
convention.
agree because the 2023 ones are a subset of the full.
Yes. Okay, so I'm assuming then you are moving the change that's on the screen, which is to amend Article 9, Sections 1 and 2
Yes,
as follows, adding subsection E.
right.
Okay, now I'm trying to think of the best way to handle this, and you know what I'm going to say. It's I'm going to move a substitute. I think that's the best way to handle it. I know we have some less experienced people on the committee. So this is the primary proposal right in front of you. I'm going to, and you have to let me know if when I switch word here, did the screen switch on you guys?
Yeah, it did.
Okay. All right, I'm going to stick this in your document just so we have them together
Okay.
in one spot. And this isn't amending your, I downloaded a copy. Okay, I'm wondering though, Mike, before I move my substitute, that this right here that I've highlighted, I'm thinking we should amend the title of the document in the same way Nationals is called the Bylaws and Convention Standing Rules. I'm going to move that separately though, since you didn't deal with the title. So no matter which of our two proposals is adopted, I still think we should change the title, but I'm not moving that right now. I'm going to move
We'll
it.
come back to that.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to delete that off the screen for right now. So I'm moving a substitute in which there are no changes to Article 9 conventions. Instead, there's just one change to Article 13 amendments that adds that bylaws and convention standing. So it already says these bylaws can be in odd numbered years, may be amended by a 2/3 vote, and it just adds and convention standing rules. I'm going to give my argument for this, and then I'll describe how we're going to handle a decision, the way the decision-making program will go. I think mine is in the correct spot under amendments. I don't think we should talk about how something should be amended in a section other than amendments. When people want to see how something should be amended, they're going to go to the section called amendments, not called conventions. And this just adds 4 words, and I think accomplishes everything. by the fact that it's during odd numbered years, it is amending it at the same time as the bylaws. So it's not a special convention, though in theory, if we had a special convention in an odd number year, I suppose somebody could amend the convention standing rules. But I have to say, I'm not terribly lathered up if somebody tries to amend standing rules at a special convention. The special conventions are called by the board. They can be suspended. I'm not terribly concerned about that. I don't think we need to mention that conventions will use convention standing rules. That's what convention standing rules are, just like we don't need to have Article A that says the Colorado Party will use the bylaws. That's what the bylaws are for. I don't think you need to be self-referential in that way. So I think my substitute is in the proper spot and is simpler. So that's my argument for it. The way we're going to do this is we will hear debate and amendment on Mike's proposal, which is called the primary proposal. When there's no further debate or amendment on Mike's proposal, then we move to debate and amendment on the substitute, which is my proposal. When there's no further debate or amendment on either of them, the motion will be, shall the substitute be the primary motion with any amendments that we made, or will the primary proposal, which is Mike's, remain along with any amendments that we made? I'll go over the process again, before we get to a vote. Substitutes is something we're going to do a lot during our time together, so you will become an expert at them, but this is probably the first time any of you have encountered the concept. So it's right now we're up for debate and amendment on the primary motion, which is the one proposed by Mr. Seebeck. Mr. Seebeck.
Okay, the reason it's worded the way it's worded is a couple of things. Number one, it explicitly links the convention rules into the operations of the convention. That explicit link has to be there. That is a mandate that has been put on this committee going back 6 years. Just saying that the rules exist doesn't put them into a position of being tied in. It puts them into a position of having to be adopted every single convention instead of an automatic adoption. As far as the amendment part goes, okay, there's a fundamental difference here between what I'm proposing and what Karen Ann's proposing. Karen Ann's proposed that they would be amended every odd numbered years, and my proposal says amended any year for an annual convention. That's a key point, because if something changes where we have to make a change for some bizarre reason, say the minor party law changes or some other outside factor that requires an amendment to these rules happen, any convention to do this gives us the maximum flexibility to do it. On the other hand, the term convention itself and the term special convention are distinctly defined within Article 9. They have very distinct definitions. So the distinction between the two is in there. So the concern about amendment of a special convention at an odd year is really not relevant. I think mine is a better proposal because it addresses the issues clearly and explicitly rather than implying stuff.
Hey, Mr. Fiore.
Yeah, so I guess I just mainly have a question on this. I guess my main concern with this version of the proposal is the language of the convention shall use and follow the convention rules. Doesn't that make it like a bylaw that like all the convention rules then become a bylaw essentially? Because we would have to change it by a 2/3 vote. Like we can't just suspend the rules on that. Or I mean, maybe I'm completely wrong. That's a concern I have.
I'm going to take that as a parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Fiore. No. convention standing rules are suspendable. But when you suspend a rule, you can only suspend a rule for within a session. You can't suspend a rule for anything that takes place outside of the session. So the convention standing rules can be suspended by a 2/3 vote, or they can be amended, which makes it a permanent suspension, like you change it. So putting it in the bylaws doesn't change the fact that they're suspendable. There's a common misconception, because it's a good rule of thumb to say your bylaws can't be suspended, but they actually can if they're in the nature of a rule of order. Any bylaw that's in the nature of a rule of order is suspendable. So this is just a rule of order that's referring to rules of order. So that does not change the suspendability of it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just completely forgot about that, so I appreciate it.
No problem. Okay.
And I would. Sorry,
Would you, so I'll put you in the queue next, Mr. Rutledge, to
Thank you.
answer some of the debate points. When you adopt permanent standing rules that are appended to your bylaws, that means they're used at convention. You don't have to state that. Our national bylaws don't state that. It's just not necessary to be stated. We have a trajectory in our party to screw with our bylaws pretty majorly every bylaws committee. And what becomes a lightning rod for messing with the bylaws is language that doesn't need to be in there. And we hear talk of, with all due respect to Mr. Rutledge, who had said something similar before, I just happen to disagree, so I don't mean any disrespect by this. You have comments like there's deadwood in the bylaws. And putting language in there that doesn't need to be in there, that is in fact deadwood. And then what happens is not only do things that can be removed get removed, then everyone, like, it turns into chum in the water, and all kinds of other stuff need to be removed. I think it's incumbent upon us to only put what's absolutely necessary to be in there. And it's just not necessary to say, if you've adopted permanent standing rules, that you're going to use the standing rules. It's just parliamentary, not necessary. And that's why it doesn't say that in the national bylaws either. And I can't say there's no state bylaws that say this, because I've never even occurred to me to look, but ones I'm thinking of for conventions that I've been parliamentarian at, they haven't said this. Now, I'm not saying none of them do, but none that I can recall do. And national certainly doesn't. Because convention standing rules are suspendable and the recommendations for them should come out of the bylaws committee. The bylaws committee meets odd numbered years. So I think that's when it's proper to come out of a committee to do our amendments, because they can be suspended. There's nothing, if minor party law changes, we can suspend them due to that. And in fact, Robert says, if any of your rules or bylaws are contrary to state law, they're null and void anyway. So I don't think that's a concern. And I think my language has it in the proper section of amendments. Scrambling to go through Robert's here for the sample bylaws, because I think it pretty much says you put anything about amendments in your article entitled amendments. Mr. Rutledge.
thank you. Maybe I've been spending too much of my career taking pains with cascading style sheets, but I have seen that the Robert's Rules of Order have been altered over the years from time to time. And even though they do talk about suspension of the rules, I'm not confident that we can continue to rely on them to do them the same way as long as we need to refer to Robert's Rules of Order. So just out of sheer comprehensibility, I think it should be spelled out, even though it is not, quote, necessary. Because not everyone is a parliamentarian. Thank you.
Mr. Seebeck?
Yeah, okay. First of all, I can agree with your statement about the suspending them and to deal with them in the odd numbered years. But an implicit link is not an explicit link. Just because the national bylaws don't specifically state that we're using the convention rules doesn't mean that they're unnecessarily adopted for use. This specifically says that they are adopted for use. Absent that, you need to do it every single convention. Whether that's been done properly over the years or not, it doesn't make it right to skip doing it. This resolves that by allowing it to be done through the bylaws, and saying the bylaws, the people have voted, the delegates have voted to say that they will use these rules. Bang, here they are. No application required. It's explicit. It's clear as a bell. That's not deadwood. That's not anything that should be done. And the bottom line of it is better to be clear and explicit about what is being done than to apply it, leave a gap, which people can then play parliamentary foosball or bylaws cudgeling to try to disrupt things or cause problems. This is as tight as it can get without having to worry about those types of problems. I'd be willing to say, let's take the 2/3 amendment deleted part out of this 2 section E's. I'm okay with that. Because I think I do believe that Karen's point about the odd numbered years and suspension is well taken. But the explicit link needs to be in there. That is our mandate from the delegates, not an implicit one, an explicit one.
Mr. Hirschman? Oh, one moment. Mr. Seebeck, are you making a motion to amend?
Yeah, I think I am.
Okay,
Yeah, I think I am actually. For each of the 2 subsection E, strike the second sentence. And leave the first, yeah.
okay. Oh, whoops, I didn't mean to unbold that. Mr. Hirschman, I'm going to come back to you on the main debate on the primary, but did you wish to speak at all on the amendment?
I got a parliamentary inquiry real fast.
Sure, Mr. Seebeck.
Okay, based on what I just said and agreeing that your substitute solves addresses what we're striking here.
I think then you're.
Are these 2 in opposition to each other at this point? Because they're not necessarily opposed. They're kind of compatible.
In a way, so the emotion I think actually you should be making is to strike those and add the language of the substitute. Because you
Okay.
can do that. So let me.
Then that's when I'm going to move then.
Okay. So I'm just going to highlight, this is just the substitute down here. This is the motion up top here that Mr. Seebeck is making to the original. I didn't mean to strike out E here.
That's a formatting issue. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, everyone understands that shouldn't be stricken out. That E should remain, but that's going to bug me.
That's just word being word.
Yeah, but
That's why I put those. That's why I put those. Put those proofreading marks on the back end so I can check that.
Okay. I'm not using the same color blue, but I think we get it. So the
what you
motion
mean.
to amend is from both new section E's to take out the part about, amendments.
Yes.
So section, Article 9, Section 1E will be the convention shall use and follow the convention rules, and same thing for Article 9, Section 2E. And Mr. Seebeck added in an amendment to Article 13, which would add and convention standing rules to the amendments on odd number years. Mr. Hirschman, did you wish to speak at all to the amendments, or do you want to stay in spot for when we get back to it as amended or not?
Kind of lost track. What I wanted to do was say that I agreed with you on getting rid of some of the language that seems unnecessary, because to me there's a difference between something being implied and being implicit. If it's implicit, then you don't really need to say it all over again. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hirschman. Does anyone wish to speak to the amendment that Mike moved to his original proposal? Okay, I'm going to ask, is there any objection to the amendment? This doesn't adopt either of the proposals. It would just adopt the amendment to the primary proposal. Is there any objection to those amendments to the primary proposal?
You repeat what it is, please.
Certainly. What it basically does is adopt the substitute, but retain two new sections in Article 9, Section 1E shall state the convention shall use and follow the convention rules, and Article 9, Section 2E would be a special convention shall use and follow the convention rules. So it basically is adding mandates to use the convention rules in both of the conventions and moving the amendment language to where I argued the amendment language should be. So right now, the only difference between the two proposals is whether or not we say that each of these types of convention shall use and follow the convention standing rules.
Thank you.
So is there any, and this doesn't adopt anything, it just makes the primary, it's moving the primary amendment. It's adopting the substitute language into it. Is there any objection to this amendment? Okay, hearing none, the primary proposal is amended thusly. I don't know how I meant to put John's hand down, and I put my hand down, and Mr. Seebeck's after me. So let me put John's down, and I'm going to, so right now, basically the only difference between us is whether or not we need to explicitly say use and follow the convention rules. The mandate was to adopt permanent convention standing rules. It wasn't to put anything in the bylaws like this. I understand the argument that it needs to be there. I absolutely disagree that absent this language, you have to adopt them every time. That's just not correct. And that's really all I can say on that. By particularly with the motion that's going to be made next to change the title of the document to bylaws and convention standing rules, there's your explicit mention. It doesn't need to be in the body of the bylaws. Mr. Seebeck.
Okay, a couple things. One, I want to comment about why there's two sections here versus another section being added to the article. I did it that way on purpose because we explicitly split out between the two conventions. In the absence of those two second sentences, this could be, and I'm not proposing this, I'm saying it could be redone to be a new section. Oh, what number would it have been? Hang on. It would have been section, where the hell is it? There we are. it would have been section, section 5 of Article 9, which would have said all conventions shall use and follow the convention rules, which would accomplish the same thing. But I didn't propose that at the time because that wasn't where I was going with that. However, I will point something out. Okay. Changing the title of a document does not implicitly link the contents of the document or two documents together. That's not the way it works. That is a stylistic and not a substantive change to how things are written. And we're talking substantive change here, not a stylistic one. So I disagree with Ms. Harless on that one. Just because a title says something doesn't necessarily mean that it's directly applicable to the documents attached. The same way that titles of a section, while they're meant to provide clarity, changing a title is a stylistic change, which under common sense should match up to what you're talking about, but it doesn't explicitly or tie things in directly. That's just not the way these things are written. And I've written my share of bylaws.
Hey, is there any further debate or amendment on the primary? Hearing none, we move now to debate and amendment of the substitute, which which is the highlighted area. Let's just keep them highlighted because that keeps it separate. I really don't have anything further to say other than I think this is the only change that is needed. There's very little difference between them, but I will say this. I do think the primary proposal has been made much better by the adoption of this, because this is where the amendment language belongs. It's the thing I felt most strongly about. If the amendment language wasn't put here, I really would have considered a minority report. If the primary is adopted, I don't feel strongly enough about it to do a minority report. I tend to think, though, that those sections E will be stricken from the floor because they really just aren't necessary. But I think it's been much improved. I would still urge that we just adopt the substitute. But, you know, this process worked exactly how it's supposed to, where I think it made the primary proposal much better. But that's really all I have to say on that. Is there any further discussion, amendment, or debate on the substitute?
I think we should strike 1E and 2E now.
And in effect, by making the substitute the primary, that is the practical effect of it. So anyone who doesn't want 9 section 1E and 2E should make the substitute the primary. If you want section 9 1E and 2E, you should make the primary. You should strike the substitute and just keep the primary. Mr. Seebeck.
Helps if I unmute first, yes.
Yes, it does help.
I pretty much said my piece on this, but I'll just say one last thing. It's better to err on the side of caution and be a little verbose than not miss something and cause a hornet's nest.
And there's actually, I wanted to respond to Mr. Rutledge that I forgot. It's general, permanent parliamentary law that rules can be suspended. That is not something that's ever going to change in Roberts. There are things I think that you could reasonably say, well, I don't know how this is going to be. Like maybe in the future, Roberts will add something called the vote of no confidence, which is something that a lot of parliamentary authorities have. But suspension of the rules by a 2/3 vote, that's been around for like 150 years. I would 100% say that's not a valid fear. just parliamentary wise, it's not. It's part of the general parliamentary law and is part of every single parliamentary authority. However, some parliamentary authorities allow you to suspend rules by a majority vote. I can't remember which one it was. I just learned about it, but there is always provision for suspension of rules. That's the whole nature of rules and why to have it not in bylaws. It will never elevate a rule to the level of a bylaw. To answer just one, make it as short as possible to what Mike said. I just don't believe in everything that's in the bylaws. Our bylaws could be 50 pages long, to err on the side of caution. I just think it needs to be what's necessary. And I think the fact that the National Party bylaws don't do this, and I know the National Party bylaws has a lot of problems, but the convention standing rules isn't one of them. And the idea that we have to adopt new convention standing rules if there isn't a bylaw that says you have to use the rules has never been brought up ever since we've had these adopted. And if someone would have brought that up, it would have been Aaron Starr or Alicia. I think everyone who's been to a national convention knows how fussy they are. And Alicia had a huge hand in this, and she's a PRP. And while I have my disagreements with Alicia, she's one of the parliamentarians I respect, her and JJ, on the planet. So I think I've said my piece on
Because it
this.
hasn't happened before doesn't mean it won't happen in the future.
It'd be promptly ruled out of order because it's.
So somebody substitutes the rules of something else, then that's not going to matter because it's implicitly linked. Nope.
Well, let me tell you the downside here. The fact that we put it in our if we put this in our bylaws, will seem to state that we do think it needs to be explicitly stated. Then say in the future, someone doesn't think it needs to be and it gets struck, then all of a sudden we have a historical record here where the intent of the convention that struck it will be called into question. Are they now saying we don't have to use it because it was in there and it was struck, and we start getting into a morass of trying to read intentions rather than just not putting unnecessary language in there to begin with, rather than creating a weird record that people are going to have to try to interpret.
I think that's backwards. I think the absence of the explicit linkage is what can cause the ability to go around using them in the first place. Whereas if they're explicitly tied together at the hip, then they can't go anywhere. You know, we don't want to create a loophole. We're trying to close one here. And that's the key point. Just because nobody's seen it before doesn't mean that somebody else won't bring it up. Part of the job of constructing bylaws and rules in these cases is to try to make sure that all the gaps are plugged, the loopholes are closed, and that everything is as tight and as functional as possible while still maintaining a level of leanness. Adding these two sentences does not create deadwood. It does not do anything except make sure that we're tight. And I think the idea that is adding verbosity, what it's not, we're not talking paragraphs here, we're talking two sentences. That's not adding verbosity, that's adding clarity. And I would remind people that we are not here to cull and sacrifice clarity because of an allegation of verbosity.
Well, I'm not going to rebut it. I'm confident in what I've said so far. Would anyone, Mr. Hirschman?
Yeah, I was away for a sec. I may have missed what you said, Karen Ann, but it seems to me that having that in the bylaws, it sort of makes one wonder if it's actually rules and not bylaws, and could we suspend them? That may be what you already said. If so, I'm sorry I missed it. But I think it's a bad idea to have it in the bylaws like that.
Thank you, Mr. Hirschman. Anyone else? Okay, if you could lower your hand, John. We're going to go to a vote now, and I'll explain exactly I'll take you through it step by step. And it is, the motion before you is, shall the substitute, which is the highlighted language, become the primary motion? Nothing gets adopted yet. We will then have to do a second vote if it does become the primary. And if you say no, then we are back on the original proposal as amended by Mr. Seebeck. But before I move to this vote, I need to caution you on something, just in case there's any other changes you want to make to this primary one. What if the substitute is rejected? Actually, this goes for either of them. Your time to amend either of these two is now. Once we adopt one of them as the primary motion, no further amendments can be done to them except adding language. So look at it and make sure there's no further amendments anyone wants to make. Okay, so the question before the committee is, shall the substitute become the primary motion or the main motion? And I'm going to do this by roll call vote, just by the way you guys are appearing on my screen. A yes vote will make it the main motion, and the original primary with as amended goes away. A no vote will make this go away, and we'll be back to Mr. Seebeck's primary as amended. John.
I'm sorry, what is the substitute?
The substitute is the highlighted where it just deals with how to amend them and does not have section 1E and 2E.
Okay. So if I'm voting yes, what does that do?
That makes the substitute the primary motion, and then we'll have to do a second vote to adopt it.
Okay, I'm a yes.
Okay, Mr. Bishop,
Yes.
Mr. Wark,
No.
Mr. Seebeck,
No.
Mr. Labrie,
Yes.
oh my goodness, Orion, how do you pronounce your last name?
Oh, it's a Shellhammer.
I'm sorry if I mangle it. So Mr. Shellhammer,
That'll be yes.
Mr. Fure,
Yes.
Mr. Rutledge,
Yes.
okay, that is 6 yes. I'm not going to be voting. So I'll be expressly abstaining. So it's 6-2. And so the substitute is now the primary motion. So it's the highlighted language on the screen. The only amendments that are in order at this point is adding language, which to this paragraph, which really, I don't want to speak for anyone, but I don't think anyone has indicated any interest in doing, but I'm going to give a moment for this. Okay, so now we are going to vote on whether to make.
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, Mr. Seebeck.
Okay, just for clarity, are these special rules or are they standing rules?
The term is convention standing rules, and convention standing rules contains both special rules of order and standing rules. It's a parliamentary term of standing rules contains both. And I can give you the Robert citation on that if you need it.
And I'm not worried about that. I just want to make sure it's clear.
Yeah.
To follow that, does it make more sense? This may not be, this is not only a parliamentary inquiry, maybe it's more of a general question. Does it make more sense to just call them convention rules if they include both standing and special? Because it sounds like standing would exclude special, or is that just picking nits?
Well, let's look at, I have no problem either way.
I just want to get it right. even though I'm not sure we are, but let's make sure it's clear, you know?
Okay, 1 second here. There is just one thing I want to look up.
Isn't the term convention standing rules kind of standard?
It is. And yeah, and that's the way it's referred to. I'm looking up the Roberts citation. I'm looking at the wrong page. Oh, 59. God, like all these numbers are just, because I just looked at it. And 1 second here. The standing rules of convention usually contain both parliamentary rules relating to the conduct of business and non-parliamentary rules, so that in some ways they resemble a combination of special rules of order and ordinary standing rules, but they're called convention standing rules. That's the way they're referred to in Roberts. Okay, so we are now on voting whether we will adopt this language as the proposal of the committee. Since we had so much debate, and I sensing there's a lot of agreement on this language, there was just disagreement on whether we should or should not include the other language, which got rejected. I'm going to ask first, is there any objection to adopting this language as the proposal of the committee? Okay, hearing none, this will be our proposal. At this point, I want to move changing the title. And I'm going to move this into the other document because I'm just kind of keeping track of everything in this document. So I am moving to add "and convention standing rules" to the title of our document, so that the final title will be "The Bylaws and Convention Standing Rules of the Libertarian Party of Colorado." I'll briefly speak to it. It follows the convention that, and what I mean by convention, I don't mean like convention, style, I suppose is the word I'm looking for, of the National Party. They have it in their title. I'm trying to think, this is also pretty common to, when you're appending a document to your bylaws, to change the title, and it also makes it clear that the convention standing rules are not bylaws, they're convention standing rules. Is there any further discussion? Is there any objection to adopting this change of the title? Mr. Seebeck.
Yeah, I have a point of order here. Well, point of inquiry. Do we not have judicial committee rules, and are at the national level and at the state level, and are they also not linked to the bylaws in the same manner?
I don't understand your question. I'm sorry.
We currently have judicial committee rules at the national level. We currently have judicial committee rules at the state level. Are they not tied into the bylaws at the same time because those committees are using those rules?
We don't have appellate rules at the state level.
I'm under the impression we do.
I don't think we do, but hold
I
on
was
1
asked to
second.
consult on developing them, so yeah, I'm pretty sure we do.
Hold on. I want to look up our bylaws. Do our bylaws give them authority to adopt their own rules? Because if they don't, it's improper. They could adopt rules all they want. Committees don't have the authority to adopt their own rules unless it's granted to them by the bylaws, if they're a bylaws created committee, or by the appointing body, if it's a board created committee. So let's look up our bylaws right now. I'm doing that in the
Article
background.
7.
I'm sorry.
Article 7.
Yeah, I'm going there. I didn't have those up already, which might have been nice. Does it say that? I don't see anything about rules. Am I missing it?
No, not in this case.
Yeah, if they've adopted their own rules to the extent that they conflict with any standing rules adopted by the board or a parliamentary authority, they're invalid.
Now that is directly a conflict of interest because the judicial committee is a quasi committee that does not have is not subject to the oversight of the board. However,
Wait.
and that's a different issue. My point is that they're not tied in either.
I think we're going off topic of the motion. At this point, the motion before us is to change the title, whether or not the judicial committee has the authority to adopt their own rules is something that would have to be it's a separate subject. Maybe that's something
Are
we
the
should,
National Judicial Committee rules linked into the national bylaws?
the national bylaws give the judicial committee the authority to create their own rules.
That's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is the actual document of the National Committee's rules tied to the national bylaws? And we look at them online, they are. They're not separate documents. They're all tied together.
And the title of the national bylaws mention the judicial committee standing rules. So,
Yes.
but our judicial committee is not granted the authority to create its own rules, unlike the National Judicial Committee. But we're not talking about the judicial committee right now. We're talking about our convention standing rules.
I'm talking about rules being tied into the bylaws in general.
I
And
think
that's just an example.
we already voted on this, so I'm going to rule. This is trying to relitigate something we've already voted on. If somebody who voted on the I don't like calling it non-losing side because it sounds so negative. If someone who voted on the winning side wants to move to reconsider, based upon that kind of argument, they can, but until that point, we have a motion on the floor right now, which is to change the title to bylaws and convention standing rules. Is your hand still raised, Mr. Seebeck?
Yes, because I disagree with your statement, because we're talking about the context of the title change and how it ties together, which was the whole point of my question. It's not about relitigating something else on the losing side. It's a question of, is the title the correct wording? And the question was phrased to point out that other rules, if they're going to be tied to bylaws, need to be listed here as well. And the national ones is the example.
And we don't, I've answered the parliamentary inquiry. In my judgment, and the convention can decide otherwise, our bylaws do not grant our judicial committee the authority to adopt their own rules. To the extent that they have, they're illegitimate. The national bylaws do grant the judicial committee the authority to adopt their own rules.
That's not relevant to my question. So that's going off tangent.
I've answered your question. Whether you think it's an answer or not, I leave it up to the body to judge. You made a point of parliamentary inquiry and I've responded. Mr. Fury, did you have your hand raised?
I did for a second. I don't have anything to say though.
Okay. Is anyone curious? Do they need me to pull up the national bylaws to see what's being discussed here, or I don't want to take the committee in an area that no one else has an issue on? Okay, I don't see any requests for that. Is there any further debate on this proposal? Is there any objection to adopting this proposal?
I object.
Okay, we'll move to did you want to debate at all, Mr. Hirschman, or are you just?
I simply don't think it's necessary. I think the bylaws of the Libertarian Party in Colorado is adequate. If it includes convention rules. That's all. No biggie.
Okay, thank you. Just so you know, you're really difficult to hear. I can hear you, but I really have to strain. So I don't know if anyone else is having problems, but since they're.
Sorry, I got a really shitty mic.
Yeah. But since there's an objection, we're going to move to a roll call vote, and I'm doing it just in the order you guys are appearing on my screen. Mr. Fury.
I'm sorry, yes vote, just adopts your amendment?
Yes, it adds the words "and convention standing rules" to the title.
Yes.
Mr. Bishop,
Yes.
Mr. Wark,
Yes.
Mr. Seebeck,
No.
Mr. Hirschman,
No.
Mr. Shellhammer or Hamer.
Yes.
And is it Hammer or Hamer?
Hammer.
Hammer time. I just got to think Mr. Pelosi. Okay. And you were a yes. Mr. Did I get you, Reese? Mr. Labrie?
No, you didn't. My vote is yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Rutledge.
Yes,
Okay, it is 6-2. I will be expressly abstaining. Just so you guys probably can tell by now, my habit is going to be not voting unless my vote will make a difference. I just think that's best practice. Okay. So that is adopted. We are now moving to the proposed convention rules, which those are my amendments here. Okay, we're going to go through these. I'm trying to think of the best way to do this. We're going to go through the seriation. And what that means is we're going to go section by section, do amendments to each section, but not really adopt a proposal yet. We're going to go through the whole thing. When we're satisfied, we have amended it as we wish, then we will do one vote on the adoption of the whole thing. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's go to Mike's original proposal. We're going to do section 1, which is, it's kind of long. Organization of the convention. It goes from 1A through 1F, and there's some subparts. Mike, I'm going to make one introductory statement, and then I'll let Mike speak to this. Our convention standing rules have been pretty stable over time. What Mike has proposed isn't a complete rewrite. There are some sections which I'm not going to call them a complete rewrite, but are finessing. This section, with some changes here and there over the years, is pretty stable. Just letting you know, this isn't something that Mike just invented. But if you would like to speak to this section, Mike.
What am I looking at here?
Are you seeing my screen or no?
I'm seeing no amendments here.
Right, because this is your original. I didn't know if you wanted to talk to your proposal, and then I was going to move some amendments.
No, we can go straight to the amendment as
Okay.
far as I'm concerned.
Okay, because I think the fact that my introductory statement kind of covered it. It isn't as if you sat down and created standing rules all on your lonesome. These have been ones that we've used in one form or another over the years.
They've slowly evolved over that time. but
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I want to pull up amendments that I wish to move, and other people might have others, to section 1. I'm going to do them separately because they're not necessarily all related. And hopefully we can get through these. If you don't really have an objection, we'll move through these quicker if there's no objection. But if you have an objection, please feel free to object. First thing is under 1C, I move to add to the naming the convention officials to add a projectionist. I'll speak briefly to it. We usually have one, and we usually name them. Okay, unless I see hands raised, I'm going to assume nobody has any debate. So I'm after, okay, Mr. Rutledge.
this is more like a point of personal privilege. How widely does the term projectionist work? If we get into virtual meetings, will it be anyone who is co-hosting the Zoom meeting, for example?
Okay.
Or is that something else that would be under other convention officials as needed?
Okay, just as a learning opportunity, that's a point of parliamentary inquiry, not privilege, just I
Oh,
try to just train people as we go. A projectionist is the person who is putting up the proposals on a viewable screen. We don't allow electronic conventions, so the issue of what this would mean in an electronic convention, I believe, is a non-issue, but it would be whoever is putting it up on the screen. Generally, the secretary's busy with minutes. We try to have a separate person that assists, but some conventions we don't have a projectionist, but it's just, we would name one if we needed it, but you are correct. In a Zoom meeting, I suppose it could be other convention officials, and that should say as needed, right, Mike? Is that a typographical error?
Yeah, it probably is. It should be
Yeah.
as needed.
Yeah, just stick that there. We're going to pretend like it's just said that from the beginning.
It's a Scrivener's.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Rutledge?
Just make sure we carry that
Yes,
through in
thank
the
you.
other set.
Yeah. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. Is there any objections to adding projectionist to the list of pretty standard convention officials?
But what about as needed behind convention officials before the colon? That way, you know,
Okay, are you suggesting, John, taking as needed out of number 5 and
Yes.
moving it up to before the colon?
yes, I am.
Okay, we can move that next, if that's okay.
Oh, okay. I got you.
I'll put you next. We're not going to hog it all with my things. Do you have an objection though to adding projectionist?
I do not.
Okay. Seeing no objection, we've adopted that. Now, Mr. Hirschman had an amendment to strike out as needed from B5 and move it. Hold on. To up here. So that I'll let you speak to that. I think I understand your intent.
It's just that way, if we're in a situation where we don't have a sergeant on, it's because we can't, because we're not in person, or we're, you know, any other reason for one of these things to be inappropriate for the particular convention, then this gives us the flexibility to not go, oh, we can't do that because the bylaw says or the rules say. It's just more flexible.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hirschman. Mr. Seebeck?
I think this is kind of superfluous because these convention officials are going to be physically present at the convention, whether there's a virtual aspect to it or not. And because, as was mentioned before, we're not authorized for virtual conventions at this point anyway. The as needed can stay where it is and it covers the situation.
Thank you, Mr. Seebeck. I'm actually going to give a little bit of an alternate argument, but I'm going to speak in favor of this change. Because I even noticed it as I was arguing for, we don't always have a projectionist. Because on even number of years, perhaps the secretary doesn't feel they need one, because there's not going to be any bylaws or platform amendments, which is really where one is sorely needed.
You still got candidates.
I realize that, but I'm just, as a convention secretary, well, I did it. I was convention secretary last convention, and we did not have or need a projectionist because we weren't doing bylaws and platform. Other convention secretaries may feel differently. I have national experience, so I might be a little bit more comfortable with it than somebody newer. But I think moving as needed, sometimes the chair wants to be the timekeeper. We don't always, we've been spoiled with Clayton, but we might not always have an official timekeeper. So I support John's change of moving that up top. Any further debate? I'm presuming there's objection, so I'm going to go to a roll call vote on John's change of striking as needed from 1CB5 and moving it up to before the colon in 1CB. Mr. Seebeck.
Sorry, I'm chewing. Come back to me.
Okay. Mr. Bishop,
Yes.
Mr. Warwick,
Yes.
Mr. Hirschman,
Yes.
Mr. Labrie,
Yes.
Mr. Schallhammer,
Yes.
Mr. Fure,
Yes.
Mr. Rutledge,
Sorry, yes.
Mr. Seebeck.
Apologies, I was chewing there. Abstain.
Okay. All right, that passes. All right, the next amendment that I wish to move is obviously deletion of approval of convention rules, because these are the convention rules that are going to be our permanent ones, so we won't be approving them each convention. So I'm moving to strike E, approval of convention rules. Those will be in the ones that we're using for 2023. This is for the ones that are going to be the permanent ones. Mr. Seebeck.
Just in support, this was an oversight. I should have stricken this out of here in the first place.
I figured. Anyone else? Is there any objection?
Just a little bit surprised that we don't approve it even. I mean, you approve the agenda. Why are we not going to approve the convention rules, even though they're always almost the same?
Because in order to not approve them, that's a suspension. You don't approve them. They're adopted permanently. We don't approve them nationally either. We also don't approve an agenda. Well, last convention, it got very confusing. There's a standing agenda nationally. If we had a standing agenda in our convention rules, we wouldn't approve that either.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any objection? Okay, hearing none, that would be stricken. Oh, was this also an oversight, Mike? Because it mentions timekeeper and teller team over again. Mr. Seebeck?
I'm sorry, I stepped away for half a second. What was this?
Okay, but the next change under D, it repeated things that are already up top here. There's one thing that's new, which is the resolution committee. Forget about that for a second. But we already mentioned timekeeper, teller team, sergeant at arms, and any other convention officials. Was that just an oversight?
It was probably just copy and paste disease. So,
Yeah. Okay, so
Maybe it was intended as quantum superposition.
it was supposed to be like the meta reference.
Mhm.
Maybe we want to make sure it actually got done, so we said we're going to do it twice.
Yeah. So I think we could say that everything except for resolutions committee here, which I think would be D, has already been mentioned, that we can kind of all agree that that's somewhat of a Scrivener's error. But really what the difference here is appointment of 3 delegates to a resolutions committee. The resolutions committee has been a source of annoyance and confusion for as long as I've been in the Colorado Party, and we've never used it. We've appointed 3 people to it, have to try to figure out what the heck is even meant by that. And funny, I heard something on it today in some National Association of Parliamentarians training, which we don't use it as. This is unnecessary. We just don't use them. We've had 3 people sitting at a table who do nothing.
I would like to object to the whole concept, if I may.
Of resolutions committee?
Yes.
I agree. I don't like
Because
it
to me,
either.
it's control and censorship that the delegate should not be subjected to.
It's gatekeeping.
Yeah.
Let me just impart to you what I learned at a training session today is a resolutions committee is used in really big conventions. And it's not meant to be a gatekeeping function the way we've kind of had it in the past, even though it never got used in Colorado. It's supposed to be a committee that will help people perfect the wording of their motions, not be a gatekeeper. So if you're dealing with a convention of like 4,000 people, rather than wasting time at the mic going, well, yeah, that's worded kind of shitty. These are just like more seasoned members of an assembly that help people craft complex motions. We're a small enough convention that it's just not necessary. And I learned today too, we've interpreted this quite literally as resolutions, as in things that go whereas, be it therefore resolved. Roberts is kind of weird. Every motion is technically a resolution. It's just that some are in the format of whereas. This could be more properly called a motions committee. That's the way the term resolutions committee is intended to be used, and it's for much, much larger conventions. This is just not necessary at our level. I don't even think it's necessary at the national convention level. We're not that big.
What you're saying is Roberts can't tell the difference between a motion and a resolution. Okay.
Yeah, it's really bizarre, but in any event, that's just
That's a
maybe
different
even
problem.
a bit of trivia, but I don't think we need it. So I'm moving the striking of this entire section D.
Shouldn't the chair be responsible to perfect the motions?
Wayne, you're muted and not recognized. I'll repeat his question. Wayne had asked, isn't the chair responsible for helping to perfect motions? A good chair, if somebody's at the mic and has a really shitty motion, will say, I think what you're trying to do is X and reword it. But people have the right to get to the mic and make a really shitty worded motion if they want to. Mr. Hirschman.
Yeah, so the resolution committee, if it was working properly, they would offer a rewording to the person who's making the resolution, or they take the resolution and change it and then present it. In other words, are they censoring? And you know what I mean?
Well,
cooperative thing.
It's supposed to be a cooperative thing in order to save time when you're going to have dozens of people making poorly worded motions. In these larger conventions, people go there and they have to submit all motions in writing ahead of time, and the resolutions committee suggests changes. We very rarely even have any motions in writing. Having a resolutions committee used the way it was described to me today would require nearly every motion to be in writing and go through the resolutions committee first. Mr. Seebeck.
Yeah, I don't think censorship is the right term here. The original intent of this committee was to have help them wordsmith literal resolutions to indicate the mind of the convention regarding specific issues. Like, for example, resolve that the convention calls for the pardon and release of Silk Road guy. I forget the guy's name, but you see what I'm getting at, versus crafting motions for this, that, and whatnot to be held on the floor. That was the original idea behind the resolutions committee. I agree, but I wouldn't call it censorship. I would call it assistance. But in this case, I agree completely. We need to get rid of it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Seebeck. Anyone further? Is there any objection? Okay, hearing none, that will be stricken. Okay, next thing is 1E. I move to add to the Credentials Committee report. It's talking about updates as new delegates come throughout the day and the number of registered delegates changes. There's updates to the Credentials Committee report. This is just to indicate the vote by which it will be adopted by. And so I wish to add to the end, and shall be adopted by majority vote. Any discussion, Mr. Seebeck?
Isn't that implicit in Roberts? Or listed in
Well,
Roberts?
we mentioned it earlier here. If you look at your sentence 2, where it says whereupon the report shall be adopted by majority vote. So I was struggling here as to whether to strike the earlier mention of majority, or just put here that both updates and the original shall be majority. Either change, I think, would be fine. I do think, yes, it is implicit in Roberts. But what's not implicit here is that the update has to be adopted. I think this rule can be interpreted as the update is kind of informational. And I wanted to make it explicit that this is actually amending the original report and has to be adopted.
I'm good.
Mr. Herjman?
Yes, could we combine the last 2 sentences into one?
Okay.
Or is that a?
Well, I think we could. The Credentials Committee. Well,
What I was thinking was the
That
Credentials
would be out of
Committee
order at the
will
moment.
report changes from the initial daily reports at times indicated on any approved convention agenda.
okay. It wouldn't be out of order, Mike, if he was moving a substitute. But before you actually move that, John, I think the sentences could be combined, but I don't think they'd be as clear as they are separate, because the first sentence is saying they will provide an updated report and when, and then the next sentence is saying what the update will include, which is only changes, rather than recapitulating what they already reported.
Okay.
Okay, is there any further debate? Is there any objection? Mr. Fury?
Yeah, this is a question for you, actually, Karen Ann. I guess what is your reasoning for wanting to add the section rather than at the end, rather than deleting it earlier, like the original adoption?
Because I think adding it, otherwise it would be kind of awkward on how do we indicate that the update actually has to be adopted. So I just felt it was more natural, because before, before we're going to delete something, it would say whereupon the report shall be adopted, period. And down here, it just didn't seem as natural to say such update shall only include changes from the initial daily reports, whereupon the update will be adopted. It just seemed cleaner to just say it'll be adopted by a majority vote. I mean, I think there's many ways to handle this, but to me, this just seemed the cleanest. Okay, is there any further debate or is there objection? Okay. Hearing none, we're moving on to so at the end, the whole thing will be open to amendment in case you think of something that this isn't like it's your last call. It'll be your last call before we move to adopt all of the rules. So we're moving on to section 2. And I'm going to do this motion as a conforming amendment because this term recording before secretary appears in multiple places in the convention standing rules. And if we delete it here, we should delete the word recording everywhere. We don't have a recording secretary. If you go up to section 1, there's a convention secretary. The convention secretary is just the convention secretary. We either call them the recording secretary up here, or we just call them the secretary. But the word recording first appears here, and it makes it seem like it's a separate position than the convention secretary.
May I offer a substitute motion to substitute the word convention for recording?
I mean, yeah, you certainly can. Wouldn't necessarily, I'm trying to think, it wouldn't be you'd be moving. Yeah, I guess it wouldn't necessarily be a substitute. You're just moving to amend by inserting the word convention. I'm going to pretend like I haven't formally moved that. We're allowed to in committee have a little bit of informal discussion. How does everyone feel about that? Because I don't want to go through some convoluted, I'm fine with it being convention throughout. But
Scroll
how
up,
does
please.
everyone else feel?
Scroll up, please.
Up to 1?
A little, yeah, up in the 1. Where it says specifically right there, convention C-B, convention secretary, in quotes, secretary.
Secretary.
The term is
I
defined.
see.
Yes.
I withdraw my comment.
Okay, thank you. So I am now going to formally move striking the word recording before secretary and anywhere else it appears before the word secretary. Which is, I think it's like 3 other places throughout these rules. Mr. Seebeck.
Oh, that's all I have my hand raised for.
Oh,
was
okay.
that.
Is there any objection? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move to section 3. All right. Section 3A, I moved to amend to add the phrase in the order in which they appear in the bylaws. So the chair first announces which director positions are open for election in the order in which they appear in the bylaws. And then in the 3rd sentence, it says director positions to be elected to full term shall be elected first, followed by director positions to be elected to complete a term. Both of those need to be elected in the order in which they appear in the bylaws. It's a cascading effect, and I think that needed to be made explicit. It's implicit that the chair announces them in that order, but since they're divided into first people being elected to full terms and then people being elected to complete a term, there's 2 separate things that they both need to proceed in that order. Any objection?
Mm,
Are you objecting, Mr. Rutledge?
Well,
I was going to suggest group in the order
I can't hear
in
you.
which I was going to suggest having the addition be each group or each class in the order in which they appear in the bylaws. That would make it a little clearer to me.
Are you making a motion to amend, Mr. Rutledge?
Okay, motion to amend.
And
Add
please state your amendment because I
class.
don't understand. State exactly what you want it to say.
Each class in the order in which they appear in the bylaws.
So you're moving to amend to add before the phrase I'm adding each class to be
Yes.
elected or just each class?
Each class. I'm thinking in terms of classes at a high school, for example.
Look at it
Some of
here because
which are- yeah.
I don't think the phrase is complete. Just look at the way it appears here, each class in the order in which they appear. Is that what you're intending?
Okay, the whole sentence then would be director positions to be elected, the full term shall be elected first, followed by director positions to be elected to complete a term. Each class in the order in which they appear in the bylaws.
Okay, so I do have it right. We are now on Mr. Rutledge's amendment. Mr. Fure, were you wanting to speak to Mr. Rutledge's amendment, or do you want me to hold your spot for when we get back to the original proposal?
Yeah, hold my spot for the original proposal.
Okay, without objection, Mr. Harlos?
Madam Chair, would you define cascading effect? You use that term, and there may be some people on this committee that don't know what that means.
Mr. Harlos, if a committee member is confused, they can ask. Please don't.
Okay,
Mr. Seebeck.
Yeah, hang on one second. I'm trying to bring up a document here. I'm looking at the bylaws themselves. Okay, we're under section 2 of Article 6 for the directors.
Okay,
Under section B, subsection B of section 2, it says about director elections. It gives the order for the odd numbered years and for the even numbered years. Gives them an order.
where were you looking again, Mr. Seebeck?
Article 6, state
Yeah.
party directors, section 2,
Uh-huh,
number B.
okay. I'm going to read this out loud if that's okay. Except in the case of an appointed director, the following directors shall be elected in odd number years in this order. And then it gives the order. And the following directors shall be elected in even number years in this order.
Right.
The election, okay,
Independent of each other, right?
right.
Election by delegates, not take effect, et cetera, and so on. The next section, C. The election shall either fill the remainder of the term or the next full term based on the schedule in B. That's what
Right.
C says. So it already covers the groupings and the orders already in the bylaws.
Okay,
So I don't get this whole classing thing. This is not a high school. This is our board of directors. It's pretty clear in the listings here that the full term ones are elected first, according to that list. And then the ones that fill out the terms because of the appointments or vacancies are filled out second. There's no reason to have this wording in here.
so you're objecting to both amendments, both Mr.
No, I'm not.
Okay,
I'm objecting to the Rutledge amendment.
okay, thank you. Mr. Fure.
So I was gonna talk on the main.
Oh, yeah,
amendment.
that's right.
I was actually gonna make the same point, but in regards to both parts of it, I don't think any of it's necessary for that reason.
Okay, and Mr. Harlos, did you still have your hand raised?
No.
That's an artifact? Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Fure, did you wish to speak further?
No, he pretty much said everything I wanted to say, except I think that also applies to the second part as well, because it already, like, the bylaws already require them to be elected in a specific order.
Okay, thank you. All right, seeing no further debate and there is objections, we're gonna first vote on the Rutledge amendment of adding each class to the primary amendment, which was in the order in which they appear in the bylaws, so that if the Rutledge amendment is adopted, the primary amendment will read each class in the order in which they appear in the bylaws. If the Rutledge amendment is not approved, then the primary amendment will just be in the order in which they appear in the bylaws. Mr. Fiore,
No.
Mr. Bishop,
No.
Mr. Seebeck,
Nope.
Mr. Wark,
No.
Mr. Hirschman,
No.
Mr. Labrie,
No.
Mr. Shellhammer,
No.
Mr. Rutledge.
No,
Did you say no?
I did.
Okay.
I can see which way the wind's blowing.
Okay, thank you. All right, that does not pass. We are now on the primary amendment, which is just to add the phrase in the order in which they appear in the bylaws. Mr. Fiore,
No.
Mr. Bishop,
No.
Mr. Seebeck,
Yes.
Mr. Wark.
No.
Did you say no?
Correct.
Okay,
No.
thank you. Mr. Hirschman,
No.
Mr. Labrie,
No.
Mr. Shellhammer,
Yes.
Mr. Rutledge.
No,
Okay, that does not pass. So take all that out. All right. Next, 3CB. I'm moving to add the word nominated, where it says, if upon tallying the ballots, no candidate earns a majority of the ballots cast, the lowest, and I'm adding the word nominated vote earner, excluding NOTA, shall be dropped from the next ballot. The reason I wish to add that is otherwise, in order to keep someone on the ballot and not have subsequent rounds have less people, technically the lowest vote earner is probably going to be a write-in. It's probably going to be Justin Amash or something else. I'm trying to think of a qualified candidate. Well, he wouldn't be. He's not an LPCO member, but I think you get what I'm saying. The lowest vote earner in almost every ballot election is going to be a write-in. The intent of this rule is to start narrowing down the people who are actually getting a that were nominated, that people knew they were voting for. Mr. Seebeck.
Actually, I got a technical question for later, so just keep me in the queue for that.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Seebeck, is it ripe now?
No, not yet.
Okay, so is there any objection to adding the word nominated? Seeing none, that is adopted. You just interrupt me, Mr. Seebeck, because I don't know what you have to ask, so you'll know when it's ripe.
It's right now.
Okay.
Could you zoom in just a little bit for me?
Let me see if I can do that.
It's on the
Oh,
lower right hand.
that
It's on
wasn't
the
right.
lower right hand.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, it is. Okay, we're good. Thank you. I wasn't
Okay.
sure if I was seeing it. I wasn't sure if I was seeing a typo or not. We're fine.
Okay, now I don't know why I'm proposing this next one. I'm withdrawing that amendment because I have no idea why I made it. So I'm just, unless somebody else can figure out why I made it, I'm putting this back the way it was before because I can't argue for it because I can't remember. Okay. In CD, I think NOTA, like we're using NOTA sometimes and we're using none of the above and sometimes, and I think we should probably use the abbreviation and be consistent with it. We mentioned none of the above up top. And maybe we should put in parentheses NOTA after that and then just use NOTA throughout. But in any event, I think we need to pick something and stick with it. So here I am moving to amend to strike none of the above and inserting the acronym NOTA. Mr. Seebeck.
No objection. Just want to point out that we do explicitly define NOTA in the bylaws under nomination of candidates. So it's covered, but for purposes of just keeping it consistent, this is fine.
Okay. Anyone else? Any objection to this change? Seeing none, that is adopted. We're moving on to section 4, and I don't think there were any changes in 4.
And
Oh,
the
yeah,
same
there was.
issue up above, there's a none of the above that could be NOTA.
Well, because that was the first time that was mentioned in this section, that's why I didn't have a problem with it,
Oh,
because it's
okay.
kind of a callback.
Gotcha.
It's just, since we did explicitly state it there, that's why I was shortening it. Okay, so section 4, there is changes, I was wrong. Again, I'm gonna do these separately. The 2 none of the above, since we've already called back once in the standing rules, I think everywhere else it says none of the above, it should be NOTA. Okay, I'm taking that as no objection to that. I highlighted here. Unamendable C, Article 9, Section 3, subsection G. Hold on, I wanted to look at that bylaw. I think I questioned that, but I want to look at it. Article 9, 3. What was the subsection, Mike, again?
G.
Okay, that reads, in addition to candidates, none of the above NOTA shall be a choice on every nomination ballot. At no time shall NOTA be removed. Okay, so that is characterized properly. That is unamendable. This isn't a hill I'm going to be, I will die on. I don't think we need to recapitulate the bylaws here. So I'm moving to strike that parenthetical comment. And just in case we switch around bylaws, I don't like referencing back articles, because if we ever amend Article 9 so that that section is no longer 3G, we've just like broken part of our convention standing rules. Mr. Seebeck.
I can appreciate the sentiment about the refer backs. This was put in here for emphasis because I will die upon the hill that says we will not have a repeat of what happened in Leadville, where we accidentally kicked NOTA off of a second ballot. That's why it's in there. You know, if we all have our pet peeves, if I had my way, NOTA being on all ballots would be a 7/8 with a double padlock, the same way the SOP is. But we can't do that at the moment. That was added for emphasis, just to make sure. But that's why it's in there.
Would you be amenable to it just saying unamendable, close parentheses?
Sure.
I just don't like referencing back a specific article, because you know that
No, I
happens.
get it. I get it. That's cool.
Okay, I didn't make the motion yet, so that is the motion I'm going to make. Let me first unhighlight it.
Well, it says always a voting choice. Doesn't that sort of imply that it's unamendable?
Well, I actually think unsuspendable is the correct word, Mr. Seebeck. I think
I would agree with that.
I think always isn't always in standing rules, because standing rules can be suspended. This clues any reader in that it's unsuspendable.
Okay, for purposes of clarity, then what are you moving?
Okay, what I am moving, I was answering John's question. I'm moving to, actually, I'm moving to strike, and I'm gonna instead put in the word. So I'm moving to strike and insert. So I'm moving to strike all of that and insert. Usually inserts come after the strikes, but unsuspendable.
Is that the correct, is it a word or is it now?
Is it nonsus? I think it's a word. Let me look up the dictionary. I don't know. English is
I
kind of
mean-
weird like that.
I mean, I understand the sentiment. It's just, you know,
Unsuspendable. It's used in, it says Bitcoin is unsuspendable. Unsuspended definition.
not suspended or inappropriate, improperly.
I don't know if it's really a word.
Try non-suspendable.
Non-suspendable. Yeah, I think that makes more sense. Yeah, let me look up non-suspendable.
We know what we're trying to get to. Let's just get it with the right word.
Yeah. Non-suspendable is a word.
Meaning can't be suspended. Yeah,
Yeah, non-suspendable. So yeah, that's a better
That's-
word.
that's the word we want.
Isn't it hyphenated?
Well, I wonder what our Chicago, wanna know what? I'm going to move it as hyphenated, and I leave that to the fucking style committee.
And my CMOS is packed away in a box somewhere, so I can't give you an immediate answer.
Do I have mine up here? I don't know what I did with mine. Mine's downstairs, so I do think it probably should be. It looks better.
It looks better, yes.
Okay, so I'm moving to strike unamendable, see Article 9, Section 3, subsection G, and instead insert non-suspendable. Is there any objection? Hearing none. Next one, and okay, I highlighted this as well because it says, should a written ballot be required, the candidates blah, blah, blah shall be written in by the delegates on the ballots they receive using the approval voting process. And it says this process is unamendable or suspendable as it's in the bylaws. I've conferred with several parliamentarians on this. That's actually, that approval voting thing is a bylaw in the nature of a rule of order. It is suspendable.
Okay, that raises a question though. Suspendable here or there?
Either.
That's
Even if
redundant.
we didn't adopt convention standing rules, it's suspendable in the bylaws because it's not for an officer.
Right, what I'm saying is that if we suspended it here in the convention rules on the floor, but we didn't suspend it,
It would,
and
it would do both.
Bylaws, is it still in effect?
No, you don't have to do it as two
Because it's
separate
listed
things.
twice. Yeah.
It, the bylaw, one suspension takes care of it anywhere.
Oh, okay, well then here's the question then. How much of this D is actually redundant? Which could then be stricken if it's already in the bylaws in the nature of a rule.
I don't know. I know we wanted to put legibly print and sign that was an issue that came up in the past.
Absolutely, it was.
I haven't made a motion yet, and there is comment. So let's have some little bit of informal discussion. John Hergman.
Thank you. What was I gonna say? I'm a little confused, but I know I saw somewhere in this stuff that voting is going to be one vote per person, which is not approval voting. So what's the conflict there in my head? You know
Well,
what
our
I'm talking about?
bylaws do allow for approval voting.
Yeah, but there was someplace that I read where it said vote for one candidate, which is not approval voting.
In our bylaws?
I don't remember. It might, I don't know. It was something I read in the folder that I made up from the stuff that you sent us. It could have been in the bylaws, and it might be in some other place in this stuff. I don't remember. I'm sorry.
I think it says somewhere in here that if you cast a vote for NODA, you can't vote for anyone else. That's
This wasn't bad.
Yeah, I have no idea. Apologize, but I don't know. Mr. Seebeck, does that ring a bell to you?
I'm looking, but I'm wondering something here. Hang on, let me check something here.
And Mr. Furry, I'll get to you after we answer Mr. Hirschman's question.
Okay, there's nothing up there. Hang on. Nomination candidates, blah, blah, blah.
I keep trying to scroll the screen. It isn't working.
There's
Yeah.
there's nothing in there about only one candidate voting. No, for voting for one candidate.
Yeah, that does not ring a bell at all, John.
Okay, sorry. I don't know what I've been smoking.
Yeah, share. Mr. Furry.
A point of personal privilege. Is there a scheduled end time for the meeting?
9 minutes. Unless somebody moves to extend. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that answered it.
Mr. Rutledge?
I'll move to extend because I have something for C.
Let's wait till we get there and I'll call upon you once it hits 9:30.
Okay.
Okay, then here's what I suggest after this discussion. This is my motion to amend. I'm moving to strike all of this. How come the strike's not working? Forget it. Let's take out this highlight. And having it make this a small d. So we'll strike this big D. I am gonna not even make the joke that is just automatically coming to my head because I'm filthy.
That's what
Okay.
she said.
So that this section will say, should a written ballot be required, comma, delegates shall legibly print their name and sign each of their ballots. Any ballot with an illegibly printed name shall be disqualified. Because I think all of the rest of that's unnecessary.
Agreed. That cleans it up nicely.
Okay. Mr. Fury?
Sorry, I just forgot to lower my hand.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right, is there any objection to this? Okay, Mr. Rutledge had an amendment that I'm going to call on him for, but just before I do, I'm unhighlighting this I'm going to be making the same motion just to make that say non-suspendable, but I just wanted that big ass highlight not to be there. Mr. Rutledge, you had a motion to amend?
Yes, I noticed that in the bylaws, there is a provision that affiliates shall be chartered for, but shall not be limited to the following purposes: nominating candidates for public office. But it's not clear in section C where those get funneled into the pipeline.
Okay, you just
So I
opened
would
up,
like to,
let me let you know something. We might need to revisit this when we get to the bylaws. Because I can let you know what so far has been. Precedent isn't binding, but I'm going to tell you the precedent. The word nomination is equivocal. Other parts of our bylaws that make it clear, though there's been some disagreement, this is what a past committee has held, that the word nominate there doesn't mean they get the party's nomination. It means they're nominated to be considered at convention. We might need to revisit this when we look at those two sections of the bylaws. But even last convention, we nominated somebody for Arapahoe sheriff, I think it was, because affiliates can't put somebody on their ballot. It has to come out of our convention. Now, we might wish to change that in our bylaws. We might need to look at that language, but that has been the consistent position of the party and rulings of the chair. We as a committee don't have the authority to overrule that. Only a convention or the party chair can. People objected last convention and it was not, it wasn't overruled.
okay. So when we do get to that point, which is bylaws, Article 5, Section 1, affiliates, F1, we can come back here to C and put in, for example, right after the word nominations, open paren, including nominations submitted prior to the convention by affiliates. Close paren.
Okay, wait a sec. I mean, right now, actually, okay. Right now, that would be in order because what you're saying is in accordance with the current interpretation. I thought you were trying to make it so that affiliates didn't then have to go through the convention. But it seems to be that you're recognizing that an affiliate nomination doesn't automatically give them the nomination. It has to go through the convention. Is that what you're saying, Bennett?
Yes, that's what I'm saying, but
Okay.
I'm not sure that's what Eric was saying.
Oh, no,
back
Eric
when he was
disagreed.
chair.
No, Eric absolutely disagreed, but it wasn't expressed in a formal ruling, but the convention chair last time had told him that was incorrect and there was no kind of appeal. And that's been the understanding of our bylaws. I know people have disagreed with it. So let me hear your language, Mr. Bennett.
Okay. I'm in a bit of a dilemma here because I was instructed by Mr. Mulder when he was the chair to make sure that affiliates shall be able to nominate candidates in the election. And
Well, here's what
but now I'm interim chair myself. And so I may have to recuse myself on this issue or something.
no, there's nothing you said that, I mean, I'm not gonna tell you what your conscience is, but nothing you said is a recusable thing. It's recusable if you were getting paid something by Eric Mulder, and which is not. It's just,
No, not by Eric Mulder.
I know, I'm just, yeah, I know, but by the Republicans.
yeah.
This is what I suggest, Bennett, is you make a note that we need to look at that bylaw.
Okay,
And then perhaps we can always go back and revisit the standing rules. Nothing is permanent until we finalize our report. Because
mhm.
so we can always go back and further amend the convention rules after we adopt them. Just make sure you're on the yes vote of adopting them, and you can say, I want to reconsider this one section. Just make sure you remember that. We are at 9:30.
Move to
And
extend for 15.
okay, we have a motion to extend for 15 minutes. Is there an objection to extending for 15 minutes?
Yeah, I object.
Okay. This is, it's amendable, I believe, but not debatable. But so if anyone wanted to make it shorter. Okay, let's do this by raise of hands to save time. Would Mike and John, please lower your hands. Everyone in favor of extending for 15 minutes, please raise your hand. Okay, please lower them. Everyone opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, it would require 2/3 anyway. Well, yeah, because I did limit it at 2. That fails. So we are going to be adjourned, but we do have to set our next meeting date. Today is what, a Thursday. I was really hoping we would get through these today. But Mike's going to be on the road next week. So this was his baby. I don't want to make it a day that Mike's not going to be available.
I will be unavailable through all the way to the 30th.
Of January?
No, December.
Oh, okay. So how does,
And even the 30th is debatable.
and the 5th is Douglas County.
31st I could do. That's the earliest.
No, that's New Year's Eve. People aren't going to want to do that.
But bylaws are so much better when you're plastered. They make more sense.
How does January 2nd look for people?
I'm good there.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's good.
Anyone else?
Yeah, the LPCO board has a level 10 meeting that day, so I will not be able to make it.
Is there any way you can miss it? Because that's like a weekly thing.
Yeah, that's probably true. I'd probably prioritize this over that.
Okay, so let's aim for the 2nd. Is the reason I made it 7:30 is because I don't get off work till 5:30, and sometimes traffic is terrible. But if 7 is better for everyone, you know, I could just tell my boss that I just absolutely have to leave at 5:30 on the dot. Is 7 better or 7:30 okay?
Well, are you guys, is your boss having New Year's Day observed on the 2nd?
No, we're off. We're off for a week for Christmas. We're not getting another day off.
No. Okay. Had to ask the question.
Yeah. No, I'm working on the 2nd. Okay, I'm going to stick it for 7. Because I think if we don't finish, people will be more amenable to extending time at 9 rather than at 9:30. So I'll send out the notice. I see 2 hands still raised. Are those artifacts?
Mine's not. I just was gonna say something after we adjourn, so
Okay.
please don't shut us off immediately. And that's kind of to give Bennett a little background here on what we're talking
Okay,
about.
let me then, I'm
Not
gonna
formal.
put here, start here. So I remember where we left off and we are adjourned at 9:34. So, Mr. Seebeck, you have the floor.
Yeah, real quick, this is for Bennett. Past history, we did have in past committees a proposal to have affiliates do nominations in lieu of the convention, and it was defeated by the convention. And I'm the one who championed that. The original idea was that if we had affiliates doing nominations on their own for partisan offices that are fully encompassed by those by the geographical boundaries of those affiliates, that they should have a free hand in nominating them anyway, because we didn't want to have people from other regions or other parts of the state who had no idea who these nominees were, having a say in the convention. As I argued at the time, it didn't make any sense to have a delegate from Craig having a say in a nomination for a candidate out of Pueblo and similar.
Mike, I don't think that was defeated at convention. I think it was killed in committee.
No, it was defeated. Well, it might have been, but it never got anywhere. The idea behind having affiliates do their own nominations for partisan offices is a good idea as a time saver and to make the conventions go smoother. However, there's a lot of problems as we currently stand. The first one is if an affiliate covers a geographical region where a nominated for a district is partly in one affiliate and also in a second one, which could happen, like a congressional seat, for example. How do you handle that unless you go to a convention? The second thing is, what do you do about nominations for seats that are in areas that are not covered by an affiliate at all? This was the arguments we went back and forth on entirely when we were discussing this. And the eventual conclusion was, for now, until we get all 64 counties affiliated, or however they're going to be affiliated, to leave it at the level of the convention right now.
I think it was killed in committee, Mike,
It
and
might have been.
and
was
at the
years ago.
time, it's been a while since I looked at those bylaws. I remember I was opposed.
We went back and forth on that.
Yeah,
one.
to re-articulate why I don't recall, though the memory might come back to me when I look at the bylaws, but maybe not, because we had separate constitution and bylaws then. So the language was,
that factored in too, yes.
yeah, so I might not be opposed now, but I remember I was opposed, and from what I remember, it was killed in committee by a narrow margin.
Yeah, there's a logistical a set of challenges attached to it as the LPCO is currently constituted.
Yeah, and I don't know
Those
whether
that
I'd
need to be
still be
addressed.
opposed. I remember I was opposed then, though, which is one reason why I'm putting these committees meetings up on the LP historical site, so that if in the future somebody goes, didn't we debate this, 4 years ago, they can actually go listen to the meetings. Mr. Hirschman.
Yeah, I just wanted to I don't know if everybody knows it, but the affiliates are authorized to nominate, put people on the ballot. And I'm not sure with this so-called our bottom-up credo why the state wants to rain on that parade.
Yeah, I don't remember the argument at the time, but we definitely can look at this again in this committee.
The minor party law does not have any indication on whether an affiliate of the state party can nominate people for the ballot or not. All it says in the minor party law is that we have to have some sort of verbiage in our bylaws about how we nominate candidates. It doesn't specifically limit how it's done, just that there has to be something there that says it is done.
Well, everyone
So there's no state government limitation on it.
Well, everyone put a pin in that. It seems to be a concern that we can go and take a look at that when we go to the bylaws. And that obviously then will be perfectly just cause then to revisit the appropriate standing rules. And in fact, any bylaw we amend that then would impact the standing rules would obviously logically lead to a concurrent amendment with the standing rules if necessary. Okay, everyone, if Mr. Harlos, did you have any concluding public comments at all?
I do not. I thought it was a very good meeting.
All right, everyone, I hope you have a good holiday. Mike is on his way to Alabama. And so we wish you safe travels.
Thanks.
And I wish you all an awesome night, and I'll send out a Zoom link shortly for the next
Wayne,
meeting.
close the door.
All right, y'all, have a good night.
Merry
Thank you.
Christmas, everyone.
Thanks.
Night.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.